Hello, I'm Bill LeMay, and thank you for watching Community Matters. We hope you'll continue to watch as we discuss issues facing our community and provide you with the resources and information needed to find solutions. Today, we're discussing water health with the Sound Rivers organization, and we're joined by Neuse Riverkeeper, Samantha Krop. Welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I can't wait to hear about this because I think you have a pretty cool job. First, let's talk about you, though. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am really passionate about environmental activism and also the intersection of that with education. I kind of came at this work through an interesting background. I was a high school teacher, teaching language arts, social studies, and then branching into civic engagement and forest work. And then I started to teach at the University of Oregon, where I got more interested in essentially connecting people with opportunities in the world of education to get involved in environmental activism. From there, I became a community organizer working on public lands protection in Oregon, working with community members who wanted to engage with and protect their wild forests. And that's where I got into the world of water, because of course you can't talk about forests without talking about rivers and creeks and water quality. And so kind of through that lens of environmental activism and education is how I ended up getting into the world of being a riverkeeper. Growing up, I spent my entire childhood in Florida, but spent all of my summers here in North Carolina. And so fell in love with this state and knew that this is where I wanted to put my time and energy caring for the environment. So it's kind of what brought me here.
Well, tell us a little bit about Sound River, too, and its goals and the overall mission.
Yeah, Sound Rivers is a nonprofit that's dedicated to monitoring and protecting the Neuse and Tar-Pamlico River basins. And so our task is essentially to look out for water quality and to work with all the community members who live in these watersheds to protect our rivers.
So when we talk about water quality, I think most people want good water quality in our rivers, but some of the challenges in achieving that goal. So tell us a little bit about, for instance, the Neuse River Basin or some of the rivers that you do, oversee and some of the problems that you run into.
Absolutely. And I think, when I talk about the Neuse River Basin, a lot of folks like to think I'm just talking about the river, but I'm actually talking about this whole shape that includes a lot of the tributaries or smaller rivers that pour into the Neuse. So the Neuse River Basin is really that shape, that bowl where any drop of water that falls onto the ground through some way is eventually going to make its way into the river. And so with that context, there are so many challenges for water quality, because if you think about it, anything that ends up on our land also runs into our waterways. So as a riverkeeper, I deal with pollution issues from, dirt running off of open construction sites and polluting our creeks, all the way to, forever chemicals that we're now learning more about, and bacteria, which is a really big focus. So, essentially, it really runs the gamut.
Okay, so you're a riverkeeper. How do you find out what's in the water that you have to protect? You're an investigator. So Tell us, how is that done?
Yeah, well, we work in partnership with our community, and that is so important to us. So we run a hotline where people can call us if they have concerns about pollution issues. If, for instance, they have an algal bloom or they see a fish die off, or they're concerned that there's, an industry that's dumping pollutants into the river. So we get those calls and we investigate when we get them. Our first step would be to gather information, whether that be through mapping, or we get into little tiny planes and we fly over the watershed and do aerial monitoring to get a bird's eye view of what's going on the ground. And then we go out and we'll do water sampling, and we'll actually get out there and take samples for whatever we're concerned about and get a look at the invisibles that you can't really see with your eyes.
Now, why should people care about that, Samantha?
Well, water is life, as they say, and a lot of people don't think about this, but many of our communities drink out of the Neuse River. This is, our drinking water. For many folks, it's the place that they go for recreation, for fishing, for, spending time with their families. And, our waterways, I think, are the best indicator of our collective and community health. And so if our waterways are dirty, societally we have a major problem. But certainly, for the sake of our drinking water, our recreation, and future generations, we should care about water quality.
Well, I agree. I think, again, I don't want to overstate because I can't speak for everybody, but I would think most people would be on board with that. Mm-hmm. What is it like for you? Now, let's say you find an issue, and then whatever causes that issue, I assume you would like to see that fixed in some manner. What kind of support do you get for that?
Absolutely. So we often will work hands in hand with local elected officials and regulators to address issues that we find. For example, if we find that there's elevated bacteria levels in a creek that runs through a community, then we'll reach out to the local city council or the county commission, and we'll also reach out to the local stormwater and water staff, and we'll explore options for finding the problem and fixing it. And now that can look like finding infrastructure funding, grant funding to actually fix old infrastructure. And that could also look like doing stuff like community education to teach people about the problems of, contributing to water quality pollution. But we do work with the Department of Environmental Quality on the state level, and then with, local decision makers as much as we can.
Well, this might sound like a silly question, but I thought we had laws and policies and regulations, and I know we do. There's a ton of them. Protecting the environment. Why does your organization even have to exist?
It is such a great question, and one we get asked all the time. What we like to say is that, if all of our regulations and laws were working, then we wouldn't be necessary. But unfortunately, we have an issue on the one hand where our regulatory agencies are underfunded, understaffed, and there are so many issues that we like to see ourselves as sort of filling those gaps where, our state regulatory officials don't have capacity. And so on the one hand, there's, a need for more investment in those regulators. And on the other hand, we also have some issues where, our existing laws aren't good enough. They need to be strengthened. We do have the Clean Water Act, which offered the promise of fishable, swimmable, drinkable rivers for everyone, but our laws are not yet delivering on that promise. And so one example is the recent rollback of protections for wetlands in the state of North Carolina and federally. And, that's one example of where our role becomes working to strengthen those laws and trying to make them better in the future.
All right. Well, Samantha, I know in addition to being an investigator and protecting the river, you kind of mentioned it, that you do go out, and if people are interested in getting involved or being educated, how do they do that?
Yeah, we have a robust volunteer network, and we actually rely on volunteers for many of our programs, from the trash cleanup programs that we do around our watersheds to our swim guide, which is our bacteria monitoring program, where we sample places that people like to swim and recreate. And so if people want to get involved, they can go to our website, soundrivers.org, and in the top right-hand corner, there's a button for Get Involved and Join Us. And there's many ways to do that, whether as a volunteer or joining as a member. We do have newsletters, and we are quite active in the community. So really, whether it's getting involved with us cleaning up trash in a creek, or if you want to do some water sampling, or if you want to help us go connect with your elected officials to tell them that we need to do more to protect our waterways, there's all kinds of avenues for engaging.
Awesome. Samantha, it was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Hey, and don't you go anywhere, because there's a lot more to talk about. Stick around.